So St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians today, it answers a couple of hot-button spiritual questions that we oftentimes are plagued with. We try to figure out in our life, or we can't understand, or things seem vague. And Paul goes through all these things. And I want to kind of unpack them a little bit for you so that we can recognize that even in the great St. Paul, right? Because we basically galvanize these people, right? Or we, what is it you call when you dip something into like brass or like a little baby shoe that you want to keep? And you, like, what do you call that? Bronzing it? Bronzing. Okay. So we bronze these people, right? Here's St. Paul, glorious St. Paul, prophetic St. Paul, miracle worker St. Paul. And so many times we bronze these people of the past, and we think to ourselves, if only we lived in those times, things would be better. Or if only I was like that person, then I'd be holy. Or I'm so much unlike that person that I can't possibly be holy, right? And we just gild them in beautiful framing and put paint on their statues and their images, and we're like, wow, they're saints. And they're so different from me. They're so far from where I am. So much so that the idea of the communion of saints, which is meant to be a friendship for us, that helped us, stops being helpful at all because we can't relate to them at all. We're like, wow, St. Paul, you were perfect in this life. And man, look at me, a miserable sinner. I don't know how I'm going to get to heaven because I'm not anything like you. But guess what, y'all? We're just like St. Paul. And St. Paul admits this to us. Here in the letter to the Corinthians, right? So he's writing a letter to these terrible people. Well, they're good people that he's writing a letter to in this terrible town called Corinth, right? Something to recognize here too as we fight to stop entertaining the distraction of national politics. Because let's be honest, y'all, that's really what it is. It's a distraction, it's an entertainment, and it's gossip, right? As we sort of recognize in our civil entertainment, our popular entertainment that we call politics, we don't have to live in a perfect culture for us to choose to do the right thing. That's a really important thing for us to recognize, right? Can we all agree on that? Yeah, it doesn't matter who other people elect. It doesn't matter who sits in some Oval Office. I mean, that alone, speaks of their incompetence. They can't even get a circle right? That's not what matters. It doesn't matter what the laws of the land are. What matters is the law that governs your own heart, right? So Paul is writing to these people, these Corinthians, who live in this terrible port city of prostitution and corruption and illicit trades, slavery, all this stuff, right? He's writing to these Christians whom he has been able to draw out of that culture to become a Christian convert. He who once killed Christians is now making Christians in the most unlikely of places, right? And what that does is for us, for you and me, it allows us to recognize that I am free to be good and holy no matter where I am. It does not matter what's around me. I am free to choose to do the right thing. It doesn't matter if there's a law that says you may kill babies in the womb up until the last moment of birth. It should not matter for a Christian because we would never do that. We're free to do that. And even if there was a law that said you must kill, like in China, you must kill every baby you have after the first one, we are free to say, no, I won't do that. That's ridiculous. Right? Which kind of it elevates our responsibility as Christians, because on the one hand, as a Christian, to be a leaven in the community is to appreciate the law and the order and the structure of governance that exists in order to build up the common good. Christians should be good citizens, but good citizens for the sake of the good, not for the sake of the government. Right? Not for the sake of the powerful, but for the sake of him who grants all power. Right? So already we're free, right? This is how we go into this letter here to St. Paul. Free men and women, baptized in Christ, not citizens of this world, but citizens of heaven. Citizens who happen to be passing through the United States on our way to heaven. Citizens who happen to be passing through Kenya on our way to heaven. Citizens who happen to be passing through Australia on our way to heaven. Citizens who happen to be passing through Russia on our way to heaven. It does not matter where we live today. It matters where we're destined for. And in fact, so many times as we've seen in history, it is not so much easier, nor is it less costly, but it is in fact the more difficult the circumstances, I should say, the more receptive a person becomes to the extraordinary grace of Jesus Christ. Remember Paul complaining time and again in his letters that, oh man, I just got beaten. I just got stoned. I just got shipwrecked. I just got bitten by snakes. I just went hungry for the last 3 days. My feet have bunions on them. This is something that Paul never said, right? But he did a lot of walking. I'm sure he got bunions. He did not have support in his shoe. He needed an orthopedist. St. Paul, although he did have Luke. Luke was a physician. He must have been a particularly bad physician. But maybe that's why he didn't have bunions. Okay, we're done talking about Paul and his bunions. This is ridiculous. So St. Paul, he starts this. And what does he say? What does he say to these Corinthians? Paul opens himself up in a very vulnerable way to these Corinthians, right? Here's the thing that we have to recognize in St. Paul. He is a parent who is the father of this community, the father of many communities. He's the father, as a priest, all priests are, father of many spiritual fathers, bringing life to them, sustaining them, providing for them, protecting them, doing all the things that fathers do in a realm that is unseen by humanity. Right? And Paul says to them, I'm going to tell you my weakness. One, so that you don't think that I'm perfect, because when I sin, if you think I'm perfect, it'll break you. But second, so that you know I can sympathize with your weakness. Right? How many parents go through this phase, and perhaps, I mean, it depends on how long this phase lasts, perhaps, how much damage you're going to do to your kids, right? That you think, I have to be this perfect role model for my children. My children need to learn everything from me in the positive, right? And I can never fail. The pressure that parents put on themselves to never fail in front of their kids is insane, partly because you're always going to fail in front of your kids, so that when you do, you feel ashamed, you beat yourself up, and then maybe even you take that out on your spouse, you take that out on your kids. But Paul here is going to give us an example of the best way to parent, which is to say, kids, follow me. We're going to make a bunch of mistakes. We're going to do it together. And in the meantime, I'm going to teach you all the best ways to do things. And when I fail, you'll learn how not to do it. Right? If we just kind of approached life in general, but parenting in a particular way like that, y'all would be so much more peaceful in your soul. You'd be so much more relaxed in the responsibility that you have of parents. Not neglectful. That's not what I mean. Relaxed, right? You're like, it's going to be okay, right? I'm not going to break my kid. You're going to break your kids if you are harsh to them, if you say, I'm perfect, and then you're harsh about their imperfections for two reasons. Because they're going to see you as a hypocrite because they know you're not perfect. And two, they're not going to believe that you can sympathize with their weakness and that you're only going to judge them, so they don't come and talk to you when they fail. Right? Some of you are past hearing this and this being helpful. Right? Hopefully you did a good job. Well done if you did. It's okay if you didn't. God, nothing in this world that we can't break that God can't fix, right? Well, for those of you who are starting off or don't have kids yet, just recognize this. It's okay to be imperfect, right? And this is what St. Paul says to his children about this. He says, 3 times I beg the Lord that this thing might leave me, whatever it was. A thorn in his flesh is what he calls it, right? A thorn in his flesh. It's something he's ashamed of. It's something that distracts him. It's something about which he thinks to himself, if I didn't have this thing, I would be better. Perhaps Paul thinks to himself, if I didn't have this thing, I would be perfect. Right? And so he tells his people, look, y'all might think I'm great. Yeah, I work miracles. I raise dead people to life. I consecrate bread into the body and blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus, who just died and rose again and ascended to his Father. Yeah, I heal lame people so that they're cool again. So that they can walk. I heal the blind. I heal those who can't hear. But I'm a sinner too. I fail too. I sin too. If Paul were talking today, he'd use these words. I have to go to confession just like you, time and again, to repeat the same sins that I just can't seem to get out of my life. And listen, y'all, it's not for lack of trying. I went to the Lord 3 times. I went to the Lord 3 times, and I said to him, Lord, take this thing away from me. If you would just take this thing away from me, I would be better. I would be a better servant to you. I'd be perfect. I'd be who you want me to be. And the first time I went, the Lord said no. And I thought, okay, maybe I need to do more stuff first. Maybe I need to prove to him first that I can be that person that I can't right now be, but somehow if I can be that person, he'd take this thing away from me, and then I'd be that person, I'd be perfect. So he tries better, and he goes back to the Lord a second time, and he says, Lord, take this thing away from me. I'm doing what you're asking me to do. I've left all my things. I've converted. I've left Judaism. I've converted to Christianity. I'm making converts in such droves that word is spreading that he who used to persecute us is now preaching the gospel. Take this thing away from me so that I can be the awesome St. Paul that people 2,000 years from now are going to think that I was, right? And again, God says no. And Paul's confused. He's perplexed. He's frustrated. He's so down on himself. He's doing all this good stuff that he's not appreciating, that he's not perceiving, because he's so preoccupied with this thorn in the flesh that he acknowledges in hindsight as he's writing this letter, God gave him. Does God give us anything that is not directed towards our good? Anything at all? No. Right? So a third time, Paul asks God, take this thing away from me. Take this sin, this persistent weakness, brokenness, disorder, sin in my life. Take it away from me so that I can be perfect. I want to be perfect. And God still says no. But this time, because of Paul's persistence, God gives him a better answer. He says, no, my grace is sufficient for you. My power will be manifest more perfectly through you because people will know you are not perfect. Because people will know you are weak and broken and a sinner just like them. Guys, I cannot tell you. And this probably won't surprise you, because I hope everybody in their life, who in a life of people who have made mistakes, recognize that they can learn from those mistakes and be better on the other side of it. I cannot tell you the magnitude to which this is true, that I am a better priest today because of my sins yesterday. I'm a better priest today because of the evil things that I did, because of the things I broke, because of the bad way I handled a situation, because of the selfishness that I acted out of, because of the impatience I exhibited, because of the sinful thoughts that I've had. I'm a better priest today because of those things, because I gave them to the Lord. I said, Lord, I don't want these things. Make them go away. And he says, I'll take them away from you, but I want you to understand something. It is not your job to be perfect. I've said this before, and this is where I get it from. This is where St. Paul says it, right? 3 times I begged the Lord that he might make this thing leave me, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. And so Paul says, I would rather boast most gladly of my weakness in order that the power of Christ may dwell in me. So many times people think that their task in this life is to get to the point where they're so perfect they don't need Jesus. I win life when I'm perfect. I win life when I am what Jesus wants to make me. But here's the thing, only Jesus can do that. That's why he sent his son, or that's why the Father sent the Son, whose name was Jesus, because we cannot do that ourselves. And we must rely on him. We must let him provide for that perfection. He wants us to be perfect, y'all. It's not like he doesn't want that. But he wants us to recognize where that perfection is going to come from. It's not going to come from our efforts. It's not going to come from any amount of work that we do for the Lord. It's not going to come from any degree of perfection in which we raise our children, or in which we do our jobs, or in which we love our wives or our husbands. It's going to come in his free gift to us who ask for it. Who don't try to take it on our own, build it on our own, do it on our own, and then turn around and say, look, Lord, I made myself perfect, as if he'd be proud of us. So many times we have that idea, that very infantile idea that I'm going to work on myself and then I'm going to become presentable to God. And I haven't gotten there yet. So I'm not presentable to God. So I need to hide from God. So I need to be miserable. So I need to feel like a failure all the time. Guys, we all sin. We all fall short of the glory of God. God understands and expects that. He welcomes it. So that he can show you how much he loves you by doing for you something that you don't deserve and you can't do on your own. To be perfect and to be in heaven. That's something he wants to do for us. And he's not waiting around until we hit to a certain level of perfection for him to do it for us. The perfection we have to achieve in this life, the task, I should say, not the perfection, the task that we have to perform in this life is to not quit trying. 3 times Paul went to the Lord and asked him, Lord, I don't want to sin anymore. Take this away from me. Almost weekly, I go to confession and I say, Lord, I don't want these sins anymore. Take them away from me. And every time he says to me, every time I go to the Lord, I say, I did it again. I sinned again. I did this thing again. I did these things again. He says, I forgive you. Go in peace. Like, it's no surprise to him, y'all, that we sin. It shouldn't be a surprise to us that we sin. It shouldn't be a surprise to us that we're imperfect and that we're broken. That should not be. It needs to stop being a surprise to us. And our goal in life needs to stop being getting to the end of it, or rather I should say, becoming perfect before we get to the end of it. That shouldn't be our goal in life. Our goal in life should not be becoming perfect before we get to the end of life. That's not it. That's never going to happen. It cannot happen. Only Jesus is going to do that, and he's going to do that on the other side of death. Here's a fun little apologetics, okay? You know, Catholics, we have this doctrine called purgatory. Everybody know that? Of course you do, because you've seen movies that get it terribly wrong all the time, right? It always shows up in popular culture, but it's always wrong, right? Protestants will tell you there's no such thing as purgatory. There's this life and then there's heaven. Ask them this. Can anyone enter heaven imperfect? I want you guys to answer this. Can anyone enter heaven imperfect? No. Does anybody leave this life perfect? How does anybody get to heaven? Purgatory. Purgatory is God's last work on us. Purgatory is when God makes us perfect. Purgatory is when God makes perfect one who has tried to walk the road of perfection and fail over and over and over and over and over and over again in life. Because it is not our failures, or rather I should say our failures do not keep God from us. Our failures call God to us. And he responds by doing something for us that we cannot do for ourselves. And so y'all be easy on yourselves. Be gentle with yourselves. You cannot make yourself perfect. Stop being ashamed when you sin, when you're imperfect. You don't need to be. Paul boldly proclaims it. Far from being ashamed of it, he's almost proud of it. Not because of the sin, but because of the gift that's given despite the sin. In our Christian life, we can be at peace because sin will not keep us away from God. We're the only ones that can do that. If we're ashamed of our sins and we hide from God, he'll let us hide, and he won't find us. But if we go to him like St. Paul did and say, God, look, I sinned, here it is. I'm sorry. We'll only ever hear the same thing that Paul heard. It's okay. I forgive you. You can go in peace. My grace is sufficient for you. Keep doing all the good work that you're doing. Avoid the evil that you can. And when you don't beat yourself up. Come and say sorry again. And again, I'll say you're forgiven. And one day, I'll do the thing for you that you can't do for yourself. I'll bring you to heaven.